Oh, am I echoing?
Just
a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on one second. I'm just going to fix that real
Sure.
quick. I think people are still starting to log in. So if you're logging in, welcome. Give me 30 seconds to just fix this audio.
Hey, Aseem.
Hi, Aditya. How are you?
Doing very well. Excited to chat.
I am too. This is going to be a fun session.
Should be all set now. So if you are logging in, thank you so much for joining us today. Also, thank you, Aseem and Aditya, for joining us today as speakers. I'm super excited to have you both here, especially because you both are co-founders and CEOs with years of experience in go-to-market strategies. And this is definitely one just like a hot topic in general right now. But I mean, something that a lot of people want to know about, whether they are, younger salespeople who are earlier in their careers, who just want to understand more about the business as a whole, or other founders, other people who want to start their own businesses. So I know today we're kind of going to be exploring navigating this post-pandemic world, and product-led growth versus sales-led growth, and kind of should we pick a single strategy? Can these coexist? And just kind of diving into all of that and more. So if you are watching and you have questions about these growth strategies, really about anything that Aseem and Aditya have also done in their careers, please drop them in the chat. They would love to answer them for you. So I'll let you guys kind of take this away, tell everyone a little bit more about yourselves, about your companies, and then you guys can jump into the growth strategy conversation.
Adriana, thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you to RevGenius for hosting us. This is I love doing these sessions. It's so wonderful and refreshing to engage with the audience live. So I'm going to encourage everybody to ask questions. I see Nina from Regi already dialed in. Great. So quick introductions. My name is Aseem Chandra. I'm the founder and CEO at Immersa. And I'm joined today by Aditya Kodadia, who's the founder and CEO at Avoma. So I'm just going to take a moment to talk a little bit about what we do and what this conversation is going to be about, and then start asking questions of Aditya. But please jump in. Please ask your questions. We want to make this as interactive as possible. If you drop your questions in the chat session, I'll pick them up and I'll bring them up to Aditya for his response. So for those of you that don't know Immersa, we were founded about 2 years ago, and our mission in life is to help customer success and sales teams be successful by bringing product usage data into your CRM systems in a way that lets you figure out which accounts to engage with and in what context. And so a lot more about us at Immersa.ai. We're not going to spend time on that today. We want to learn about Aditya and about Avoma. And so we're going to have the conversation in a couple of different parts. One, we want to understand and learn about Aditya, about you. Then we want to learn about your company and what prompted you to found the company. So let's just start with you first. Tell us a little bit of your journey as an entrepreneur. And I know this is your second time starting a company.
Yep.
So maybe start with your first venture, and what did that look like?
Absolutely. So first of all, Aseem, thank you for this opportunity. Really excited to chat, share learnings, some perspectives, and hopefully audience will find it valuable. As you rightly said, I want to start with a disclaimer that even though it's the second time, it does not get easier. So there are a lot of nuances, largely because quite a few areas do get easier, but at the same time, your ambition, your vision gets bigger and bolder as well. So there are a lot of new challenges as well. So whoever, don't discount just because you're a serial entrepreneur, things don't get easy. So always have that first principle mindset and keep looking as you're always learning. With that, Avoma is my current latest startup. Fun fact, it stands for a very organized meeting assistant. And what we do is that we capture these conversations that you have every single day and analyze those with AI and try to make them a lot more actionable so that you're able to have more effective conversations, save time, all those nice things. We started Avoma 5 years ago. It's a venture-funded company, Series A. I'm personally based out of Silicon Valley here, but we have a global team now, remote first kind of a culture. And before this Avoma, I was a product leader at a company called 247.ai. And I was a product leader launching some of the virtual assistant product lines there. So all the chatbot craze that you see nowadays. We have been trying to solve that problem for the last probably 10 years for the contact center and support industry first. And the way I joined 24/7 was my first company was acquired, and my first company was into social commerce space, social commerce, social marketing. Back then, this was 2009, 2010. It was also a SaaS company, and we were building a social commerce platform on top of Facebook and Twitter so that online retailers could serve their customers. And 24/7 acquired that company after a few years. And so that's kind of my story, and happy to share everything what I've learned and mistakes I've made as well.
Sounds good. So Aditya, tell us a little bit about what the founder's journey that led you to start Avoma. And by the way, thank you for sharing the acronym. I always wonder how people come up with the name for their company. Ours was simply where we could find a memorable 5-6 letter domain name that was still available. Quite genuinely, that's the story. But I'm curious to hear, I mean, you've shared the story about how you came up with the name, but tell us a story about how you came up with the idea.
Yes, by the way, so the names, just to continue the thought, it was exactly same. I wanted 5-letter domain name, get creative with these acronyms, but I wanted .com. And so with 5-letter domain name, you can't get .com at $2,000. So this is the hack that you can use. Get creative with your product statement. And also it was vague enough from a branding point of view that people will always be curious. Every single sales conversation we start with this particular thing, and there's always put smile on our prospect's face. And it's a good story to tell to start with as well.
Yeah.
Continuing with why we started Avoma, how the journey started. As I mentioned, I was a product leader. I was building this product based on AI and natural language understanding, trying to solve for a problem this for customer support space. And I was in an enterprise space working with our sales teams all the time. And I would see how anxious and crazy they would be just before any particular client call or prospect call. And they wanted to make sure every single call goes perfectly. They capture information, and all the nuances that customers share, the feedback they share, was still getting lost because they didn't have time to go and input all of this data into CRM. And on the other side, the product people, we were building product in a vacuum if you don't hear back that feedback. Sales teams were not getting paid, or customer success teams were not getting paid to give feedback to the product team. And so while I was solving this problem, I thought, why not solve my own problem where I furiously take these notes? What if somebody could understand these conversations, automate this note taking, and make sure this information is democratized and available for the rest of the organization so that the product people get closer to the revenue teams, and both of them have very tight loop with each other. So that was the genesis. I had a domain experience, and I thought, knowing as a startup, I thought it's a lot bigger problem that other companies have. So jumped the gun and started the company.
Got it. So Aditya, this is, I think, when you start a company which starts with a problem that you have experienced yourself as a founder, I think that gives you a pretty visceral understanding of the problem just from your own personal experience. But tell us a little bit more about, you obviously, I mean, there's quite a few solutions in this market.
Yes.
And you guys differentiate yourself in a unique way. So maybe tell a little bit about, now let's kind of start to move the conversation in the GTM direction, which is where I think a lot of audience is here to learn about. I see a number of sales and marketing folks join the call. Claire, Nina, Carla, nice to meet you all. You're making us hungry with your comments, with coffees and toasted focaccia. But tell us some more about, Aditya, how you differentiate against the solutions that are in this market.
This is interesting, and it might be relevant how even all the conversation that we're going to have, the product-led versus sales-led, how do you decide what the use case? So as I mentioned, when I started thinking about this is 5 years ago, when I had this aha moment, hey, why don't I solve problem for meetings? Obviously, I started talking with other people around my network from different functions, let's say product people, engineering people, sales people, customer success leaders. And everybody thought this was a genius idea. And back then, some of our competitors were launched in stealth. They were already funded, but I didn't know them. And so I was doing my customer research. I probably talked to almost 100 plus different people, leaders, took furious notes, even during those conversations. One thing I realized that obviously when you're building an AI-based product, the focus use case that you have is much better at that time to solve problems for specific use case rather than going too broad. Meetings was a very horizontal, broad product. There were a couple of products in that space which launched for a horizontal market. And so we had to make a decision that do we go also super horizontal? And there were a few other companies which were completely on the sales focus use case as well, very focused niche use case as well. Now, the challenge there was that when you're building this product and when you're thinking about the go-to-market strategy, you have to identify what's the willingness to pay of these people. When I was talking to engineering people, they were comparing us with the likes of the productivity tool as a meeting assistant, and were trying to give me price point around $6 to $10. When you talk to, on the other hand, sales function, sales or success leaders, they would compare you with the likes of the Salesforce, and they would say, okay, how much it could, I'm okay to pay close to $100 as long as it's cheaper than Salesforce license. You are still giving me value. So you have to pick the market that is anchoring, because these people have tendency to anchor you to around the products that they have been using. No engineering leader told me that they would pay $100 to a solution like this. So we started understanding that problem also. The other thing also was very interesting. We realized that who depends on this workload the most? Engineers, everybody said nobody wakes up and said that I love note taking.
Yeah.
So everybody would say that, yes, I hate taking notes. If you can automate that, I would really love to have the solution. But the moment when you ask that, hey, how much you pay, and then what do you do with this information? What are you currently doing? Then you realize that the problem was not big enough. But you go to the sales team, now they depend on this workflow. It was absolutely important for them to go and take the notes, enter this data back into CRM, and the closing of the deal was dependent on how accurate the information and the notes that you had taken so that you can follow. So we started taking those decisions to decide which market do we go after. That was our and so we, even though we felt that the product is going to be insanely horizontal, eventually, as a go-to-market strategy, we would focus on particular segment. And so typically, I have this concept. It's a triangular, three-layer cake you can imagine. So the bottom layer is engineering, architecture, how you do it. This next layer is a little more constrained, which is the product layer. And then the top layer is even more constrained, that is the go-to-market layer. So we realized that when I started discussing with my team, my co-founders at that time, we said that, hey, eventually, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, we might be having a very horizontal solution. So make sure that when you're building the solution from an engineering architecture point of view, that's our vision. That's the kind of North Star that we will have in 10 years. But when you're building the product, we will scope it down so that students cannot use it, journalists cannot use it, only meetings, knowledge professionals can use it. And the go-to-market, we said, only go after the sales leader. So that's kind of how we went after our go-to-market and finalized some of the decisions we made.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting, how companies start their journey and then where they eventually evolve to. The vision always stays true from a North Star standpoint. But what I found really interesting in your comments is you actually interviewed 100 plus companies, and then with the same problem that's interesting to solve for multiple different personas, that the sales persona and the customer facing persona is willing to pay more because they see greater value in solving that problem for them versus, say, engineering a product. Now, that helps kind of understand who's the primary user of the product. How about the primary buyer? And by the way, you have a fan on the chat session. I see Luis giving a shout out to Avoma. So good to see you, Luis.
Hey, Luis, thank you very much for the business and the shout out as well, and the love as well.
Yeah. So Aditya, tell us a little bit about when you approach a company, a prospect, what's the approach? And I know you have a couple different go-to-market motions, so we'll probably get into that a little bit with this question.
Yeah, and that's exactly, so the reason that framework helped us, we said that, hey, who is the buyer that is willing, the pain is the highest and is willing to buy right now? And so we went after the sales leaders, customer success leaders. So anybody who is customer facing function is our typically ideal buyer persona. But as you rightly also said, that the buyer persona was not necessarily also the user persona. And the product value that we were giving was for people who were using the product on the note taking side, the reps. And the buyer was a leader, but the user was the rep. And when we were trying to go, and initially the first conversation, I remember we were solving for the reps problems and showing the value in terms of the automation, the ROI from that point of view. The leaders felt that, yes, this is a good problem, but what's in it for me? And it was not solving their problem. And we had, you also mentioned early on, so we had some competitive solutions early on. They were solving for the leaders. So they started giving us feedback that, hey, you're solving an interesting problem. I like this, that these other competitors are not solving. But what if you could solve that problem for us? Then this solution makes a lot more sense, and I'm willing to even switch or migrate or all those things. So we realized that there was a gap in the market that we could start as a differentiator solution. But at the same time, now we have to give value to the buyer person. If we ignore them, they will also be looking for their own solution, because not all buyers are going to consider your user's problem. Even the users were loving our solution, we had to make sure we also address buyer. So there was a challenge in terms of how do you do the roadmap prioritization, but it helped us to understand what solutions, what are the 20% of the value that leaders wanted that will give them the 80% of the value. And we literally followed that concept and we added that solution. It turned out to be easier compared to what we thought. And then we were able to win competitive deals very strongly because we had a very strong differentiator. And you earlier asked us, so how are we different? And so there's, rather than positioning in the market as a tool to monitor these calls for coaching reasons, we position it as a more of a workflow solution. And the reason was that intelligence tools can be replaced very quickly. You have another intelligence tool that can come in and you can replace and rip off. What we wanted to make sure that people depend on the workflow. If you're doing a day-to-day task using a particular tool, it's hard to replace those tools. And that's the moat
What
we wanted to build.
what's an example of a workflow that a salesperson might engage on using Avoma?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So some of our competitors analyze these calls and they give you insights as well.
Yeah.
But that's the one piece of the solution where it happens post call. When you look at the salespeople, the meeting has a life cycle. There are certain things you do before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. One of the use cases, let's say before the meeting task would be uh, researching the prospect and making sure you're able to define the agenda and the kind of, let's say if it's a discovery or demo call, there are a set of questions that you're trying to ask them during the meeting and you're trying to take those notes for those meetings. Then during the meeting, you want to capture those important moments, take the notes. Sometimes some people are superhuman, they take the notes while the call is going on. And then after the meeting is done, they go back and they review the notes taken. Sometimes their notes make sense, sometimes they don't. Now they have to go and listen to the recording. And so we realized that the recording, analyzed recording was useful, but they were still doing all these other tasks before, during, and after in four different tools. They were using Google Doc. They had a copy of the common question. They would copy and paste it every single meeting. So when we started understanding the workflow, we said, okay, how do we automate this workflow, simplify this workflow? So that's what's the workflow. So now with Avoma, as a rep, you are able to have the template of your notes automatically detected based on the type of the meeting. So you don't even have to do the copy paste. The notes are also extracted in those categories or discovery question that you create. So there is some live note taking experience that you provide, so you can do bookmarking during the meeting. So the solution started becoming, reps started using it as a part of the meeting, how they run, and they supercharge their workflow using Avoma. Rather
Got
than
it.
just making it as a post analysis coaching tool where I can go back if I need, it became a solution that they use on every single meeting.
Got it. So Aditya, how do sales reps find your solution? How do they come across what you've built? And we started out the conversation is centered around, is it product led, is it sales led, and what's the right approach, and particularly in today's environment. But let's just start with when you started the company with Avoma. What was the first sales motion that that you started out with? Where either you find customers or customers find you.
So I think, Aseem, I'll probably also take a step back here. So
Yeah.
you asked product led, sales led, marketing led, and we had a funny joke internally at Avoma, and sometimes we used to say, "Are we being misled?" And because there are so many of these terms are being popularized, and I see a lot of the time they're being misused. And so I wanted to kind of break that thing into a notion where
Sure. Yeah.
product-led growth has two core components. One is the acquisition side of it. You rightly asked how people discover you. How are they getting aware about your brand? So that's the acquisition part of it.
Yeah.
But once they are known about your brand, what you do, the second piece is the conversion, how they eventually become a customer. And so I always like to think about product led. The growth itself is not necessarily holistically just, it's an oversimplified term. So if you think about product led acquisition and then product led conversion, or sales led acquisition and sales led conversion, that's how I like to break it. So very beginning, we always thought about that as a two kind of concepts. And I remember early on, I used to go and talk to investors, and they would tell me, "Oh, your competitor is doing sales led. They are sales led. So you become a product led and don't have any sales motion. Just do it, offer it for free, and something like that, or give trial and all of that." But the realization was that that's not how buyers want. Like it was less about what we want it to be. Do we want it to be product led just because investors like to hear that word, or do we care about our customers and what they wanted? And so we started really focusing on what's the initial, how are people going to find us, and then how are we going to convert them? And both these motions could be different. So one of the things we did was, early on, as any company who starts, you can't do the acquisition through purely product led. You have to do marketing led or sales led acquisition, because you have to go out. And so one of the ways we did content was something that was working for us. So we started writing content for our audience, and people started discovering us through organic search. We also partner with a lot of the CRM systems, so they started listing us in their marketplaces, so people started discovering us. All these were essentially other platforms or channels where people were discovering us. Once they come, so from an acquisition point of view, we also did outbound. Even I was doing outbound early on as a first founder led
Yeah.
sales. You're reaching out, nobody knows you. That's a pure sales led motion, or from an acquisition point of view. So it would be fool to say that, oh, that was pure product led growth, all we did. But the point is that once people come to Avoma, we always made sure that we took an approach of, hey, if you you're someone who likes to play with the product, you have time, here is a trial, you can go and experience it yourself as well. But if you're somebody who likes to talk to our salesperson, then book a demo, talk to us. We didn't force people to pick one of the options based on what we wanted. We gave them an option based on what they wanted. Buyer has a choice, rather than we making a restriction to them. That one of the things that I remember a lot of the time, some of our competitors customers, when they move the company, they go to a new company, they had used this product in the previous company,
Yeah.
they know exactly how the product was, and they just wanted to buy it, and they still let you not buy it right away. They will ask you to still book a discovery call, go to the demo, and wait for that process for 3 weeks. And so people were frustrated. Hey, I know everything, let me just go and buy it. So we understood these needs of the buyers when we talked to them, and we said, okay, this is a crazy experience that people are still providing. So we will let buyers to choose what experience they like, and we will make sure we support that experience. So that's kind of the initial sales motion was. And we started with, from an acquisition point of view, it was sales and marketing led. And then from a conversion point of view, it was both product led through the trial experience. And we also had a sales led where you could book the demo as well.
Aditya, I think there's a couple of really interesting points that you made that I took away from this conversation. And in fact, from an Immersa standpoint, this helps us to think through how to break the problem down, because essentially what we're trying to do is, how do I combine product data, usage data with CRM data, but with the intention of, can I help you improve acquisition or conversion or post sales
Retention.
growth and
Yeah.
mitigate churn risk, and sort of breaking out the sales approach of product led versus sales led versus marketing led, and then sort of cross checking or cross leveling that with acquisition, conversion, and then eventually post sales as well. That is a very useful framework, I think, in which to think about the problem, because you can have multiple combinations. You can have somebody that starts with a customer but then wants to buy online, or somebody that starts online and then wants to talk to a customer, or to a sales rep. And so I think those are really interesting combinations. Now, the other thing that I took away from this is, let the customer choose. So more like customer led, rather than us making decisions on what funnel we want to send you into. Give the choice to the customer and how they like to best engage. I think that's really interesting. So let me, in terms of sort of pursuing these parallel strategies that you've done, and some of it has evolved over time as the product has evolved and matured, and your thinking has evolved and matured. But what are some of the challenges of running multiple strategies, right? So maybe share a little bit about that. And you've talked to me about it in the past, but I think it's a useful conversation.
I think this is very interesting topic, because we did definitely face some challenges. There were some learnings or past habits we had to unlearn
Yeah.
to start thinking about this new behavior. First of all, I'll tell you, when people think about product led, they also think about, oh, which organizations can my product have a product led growth motion, or does it always have to have a sales? And people typically think about it from, am I SMB? Am I selling to SMB versus am I selling to enterprises? And they think if you're selling to enterprises, maybe let's say deal or even mid-market deals any worth of $10,000 in annual contract, or you have to have a sales motion. And so that mindset of people deciding which motion to use based on the size of the customer that you're serving is also not right. To give you an example, we have seen in our Avoma's experience, we had people bought Avoma and VP of sales search for a solution like ours and came to us through search, organic search, started the trial, and eventually bought the solution for $20,000 completely through product led. We probably had one conversation with them. Now, this person did not book the demo just because they were a large organization and had a lot of people. At the same time, we have people who are on the SMB side, even though we give them option to go and try it yourself, there's a free offering, all of that stuff, they would still like to talk to one of our reps. Now, when you think about it, the SMB customers technically don't have a lot of time. They don't have time to go and evaluate a bunch of different tools and make the decision. They want somebody to quickly address the gaps or make sure that they're understanding and they're confused. On the other hand, the buyers from large organizations, there are committees. They have enough time to go and evaluate and make sure they have the checklist and you do the evaluation. So sometimes they are okay to go and play. So rather than thinking of the size of the segments, think about the people. At the end of the day, there are people who are making
People
this
who are making
decision. Doesn't
buying choices.
matter. People are buyers. So
Yeah.
go with what people have different preferences rather than the SMB or enterprise.
Yeah.
Now, when we started realizing that, one of the things that we had to implement from our challenge point of view was that we said, okay, we are not going to segment customers based on are you SMB or are you enterprise. So that was the first early learning we had to do. So rather than saying, oh, if you're smaller, go to our self-service, and if you're only large, then talk to our salespeople. So we made it, that was the lesson. We said we will make it available for all sorts of customers. Of course, once you have that, you want to make sure that there's still a right amount of writing to the right kind of salespeople. So you hire people who are able to handle the transactional sales, people who are also having a little bit of large mid-market enterprise sales motion as well. You can do the routing, but give an opportunity to buyers to talk to someone from your organization. So that was one thing we definitely did.
Yeah, Aditya, I think there's a lot of questions now starting to pop up from the audience. So I think you just addressed one of them from a question that Nina asked about how do you operationalize your sales organization to convert PLG users? And what you just covered, I think, addresses that question. There are a couple of other questions. Actually, Nina had another question about how do you organize from a budgeting standpoint between product-led and sales-led strategies, because there's obviously very different motions around each one of those. So maybe if you can take that one next, that'd be great.
I think one of the, I wouldn't say I have all figured it out when I'm sharing this perspective, but I can tell you how we are currently running the process here. Definitely, we still also have our own lot of things that we need to fix in our process. And but one of the things from a budgeting point of view, I still think yes, product led is not necessarily only product's responsibility. It's a very cross-functional responsibility. Our sales team is also involved in that process. Our customer success team is involved in that process. So I wouldn't say that when I'm thinking about product led, marketing team gets certain budget and the sales team is not, because this is the fundamental unlearning we had to do, because when we hired our sales team was not equipped with the product usage data, which is the problem that Immersa is solving. And the whole idea was that how do we learn what people are doing when they're signing for the trial users and what is the right time to engage with them. And some of our reps were directly just reaching out to our prospects on the trial users, and they were asking, hey, how's the experience going? Now, that's a bad experience to the prospect, because you would know how the experience is going because you can look at the data, you could have all the answers at your fingertips. But these salespeople had never given demos, had never given understood the actual product usage. They have sold based on the PowerPoints and all of that stuff. So that was the learning we had, that hey, you need to hire also for the right kind of salespeople who would be comfortable playing with the product, understanding the data, and using the data to make their sales conversations more effective, buyer friendly. So from that point of view, when I think about the budget, we still kept the sales budget as a separate what the sales team based on the growth goals that we have. One of the things, the way we do, if I give you the pipeline generation and how we divide these things, we think about it as sales-driven organization will still continue to own 50% of the pipeline. Within that, then AEs will own 25% of the pipeline, and SDRs will own the 25% of the pipeline. So AEs are going and self-sourcing certain pipeline themselves. SDRs are going and sourcing certain pipeline by themselves. And then the marketing and product team owns the rest of the 50%.
Got
So
it.
now marketing team can say, okay, from that 15% is purely self-service. So whatever product investment we need to do to drive the viral loop, to simplify the onboarding experience, trial experience, we have to invest in that, because those are the goals that you have, because there is a revenue metric that's given to the product team as well, that this much is the revenue, 15% of the revenue is coming from purely self-service kind of motion. And then the rest is marketing led, which is now we are taking that budget and we're saying, okay, what are the demand gen programs we need to do? What are the branding exercise or branding investment events we need to do? So that's kind of how I think about the budget. It still
Yeah.
starts with the revenue goal, and then we try to define who is going to take the ownership of this revenue, and then that's how the budgeting happens.
Aditya, I think that's a very insightful response to the question, and particularly the point that I think there were several really interesting points. One, product-led doesn't imply that product owns it end to end. It's still a shared responsibility across teams. But then the flip side of the conversation, which is product then also owns a certain amount of revenue that they need to drive. Very interesting approach. So very cool. So there's a question from Claire asking about what systems are needed to support this sort of multi-pronged approach towards selling. So the traditional CRM systems like Salesforce and HubSpot and whatnot, they were designed primarily for HubSpot. I kind of think of it as marketing-led sales motion, and Salesforce as more of a sales-led sales motion. What's your sense? What are some of the systems that need to emerge to solve for the different approaches that are out there? How does it all work?
Yeah, I always believe that there is an opportunity here. Somebody build a product-led SaaS focused CRM.
Yeah.
Would be a huge market. But fun side apart, you're absolutely right. What happens with the CRM, if you think about HubSpot, is a product-led sales organization to some extent, but even the CRM, the way they're built, is not necessarily fully configured the product-led. What I mentioned earlier on, what is missing part is the product usage data. That is the fundamental thing that typically the sales teams do not have access to. So either you build internal systems, some kind of internal dashboards, and give that data access to your sales team, but you also have to then make sure that data also gets fed back to your CRM. So when salespeople do not want to use additional tool, they want to live in your CRM. So your HubSpot or whatever CRM you use has some additional custom properties, and your product data is being pushed into these custom properties. There are different ways how people are solving this problem. They're plumbing these 3-4 different tools, and that's when companies like Immersa, you guys found an opportunity that, hey, instead of doing these 4 different tools, maybe you buy Immersa or some of your competitors to solve that problem efficiently. So I think that's what you need. You need product usage data. You need to aggregate that product usage data and feed that data back to every single user in the CRM. Again, the way how we have set up our HubSpot is that every single user who signs up for the product gets added into our CRM as well. So every account eventually have all these contacts so that we know who they are, what their title is, and what the product usage data is. Right now, it's still not super simplified, but still that's kind of the experience. So now sales team have product usage data, and when they're reaching out, they know what license do you have, what functionality you have used so far, what have you not used so far. And then when I follow up with you, I'm not just saying, hey, just bumping this email on top of your inbox. It's a very thoughtful interaction that, hey, I've seen you only use these 3 things. You haven't used these 4 other things. Let me talk to you. Let me show you how to use it. This is the value these things provides. And that's how the conversation becomes lots more valuable.
Got it. Interesting. So Aditya, maybe you rightfully called out that the product usage data is very relevant in these scenarios. And I know, like, we talked to a lot of companies that recognize that, and some that are trying to do it themselves, and some that are looking for solutions in the market. But like, when you kind of look at it, and you started out as an engineer, so you, I think, have a deep appreciation for the problem from our previous conversations. What are some of the challenges with bringing product usage data to sales teams, right? Or to customer success teams for kind of post-sales use cases? What are some of the things that you've either personally experienced or observed in the market where it makes it challenging to bring that data in a way that's meaningful to the CS teams or the sales teams in the market?
Yeah, great questions. I think one of the things when you're thinking about the product-led experience for sales team, you're also not trying to dump all of the data to them because
Right.
then there will be too much noise and they will ignore it. So what you have to do also, when you think about the onboarding trial experience, the goal is not to sell them every single thing. What you're really looking at, you're also trying to segment your users. You're trying to look for this particular segment. What are the typical aha moments where they're going to realize the value in the solution within the trial period? So maybe whatever the trial period. So Avoma has a 14-day trial period. So we try to decide what will be the aha moment that customers are going to have and how quickly I can give that aha moment to them when they activate the product. And that's how, as soon as I connect something, do I get immediately value. So those are the moments you have to define and only focus on those data points rather than trying to throw every single analytics and every single data point. That's not going to be helpful because there'll be too much noise. The second moment, once they activate and have experienced the aha moment, the second phase is the adoption phase. Do they adopt? Do they come back to that particular experience few times in that trial period? Again, you're not trying to over optimize to make sure that the fully adoption has happened. That's not the goal. You're focusing on that 14 days. What are the how many times that they want to come back, and are those the enough signals? So if you focus on those particular metrics on those signals, so you have to define that for each particular segment of your customer because there are different buyer persona, user persona as well. So one metric may not be necessarily, or one kind of aha moment may not be necessarily applicable to all sorts of user persona in your product. So
Mhm.
understand who are your personas, understand what their aha moments are going to be, and focus on only those metrics and try to bring that data into CRM. Now the challenges there used to be. So first of all, the challenge should not be don't do for all, focus on the smaller set of metrics only. The second challenge is now integrating with these tools. It's not easy. Having
Mhm.
your engineering resources to do the data count and make sure that those data is available and they are integrating with the CRMs of the tools and all of that. So that's where you have to either use some third-party tools which make you not dependent on engineering resources because
Yeah.
sometimes you need additional data point eventually once you understand new journey, new experience. Now you again have to go back to your engineering team every single time you need that data. So you need to make sure that are there tools which will allow you to take the product usage data from your database or data warehouse
Mhm.
and allows you to push it back to the CRM. Somehow, Avoma, we always worked with all the CRMs. So our team was knowledgeable because we were integrating with CRMs as our own product. So they were more excited to do those things themselves. But I don't think this will be a logical use case. Not
Yeah.
every company is trying to integrate with every single CRM. And so
Yeah.
in those situations, I do see that product leader, marketing leader need to figure out a way to have tools like Immersa to simplify that experience for them.
That's there's a really good question here from Anna Maria about when is the right time for the sales team to engage with a prospect that signed up or a user that signed up self-service. So at what point do you go from, her question is how much usage is enough when you then engage with the free prospect, with the salesperson sort of stepping in. How do you
Yeah,
make that decision, or is that something that you think about currently?
100%. And I want to call out that this is not purely based on the usage only. It
Yeah.
might be also a mistake if you over anchor only on the usage data. You also have to mix in the persona of that user as well. So as I mentioned early on, if a VP of sales signs up to Avoma, we will have our salesperson reach out to them immediately early on. So even though the product usage and all of that data is there, we will still look for that because now it's a hot ICP, exactly the persona that we need. Also from a large organization, if you see all
Mhm.
that data metrics point of view, you don't want to wait for them to go and figure out and get to the threshold of the usage data that you might have defined. So be a little more thoughtful here. But yes, if the end user, if an individual AE has signed up, then we will let them go and use a little bit the tool, integrate a couple of things, make sure they've invested a little bit of resources. One of the other things we did, and Aseem, I think I had discussed this with you also a long time, we force people to not sign up to Avoma by their Gmail or something, and we force them, we add friction by design. We decline thousands of signups every single day on our platform right now. Every day when I look at, there are a lot of people who are trying to sign up. If they're not willing to invest a little bit of commitment from their end, I'm not going to invest my resources to help them. And so we want to start people to signing up with only with their work email address. Yes, we are losing a lot of signups. I'm not able to boast that bloated number to our investors that we have these hundreds of tens of thousands of users. But guess what? Everyone who gets into Avoma largely is a qualified user. Now we can research about them, who they are, because their company domain is available. We can research about their company. And then based on that, we are also making those decisions as well. So there is a product usage data, and it's a very relevant based on how you think in those 14 days period. As I mentioned, try to divide the trial period that you have into two phases. One, as I mentioned, activation, and the second is the adoption. And you might only have one or two use cases that you need to demonstrate value to them. You will never be able to, as the product gets more mature, there are so many use cases that we can't have everyone to adopt in just 14 days. They are busy, they have their own life. So don't have this unrealistic expectation that they need to do all these 20 things only then that they will be successful. So look at the persona title, also engage based on that, but also then combination of the usage, also engage based on that.
I think that is super insightful. Kind of breaking out the customer journey into different aspects around adoption and conversion and so on. But also, it's not just product usage data. You have to have different approaches depending on which organization, which persona, what scale they're at, et cetera. And you engage at different times. So,
I mean, if it's your ICP, so I'll also give an example. If a VP of engineering signs up just because the title is VP, that's not the ICP we typically go after. Our sales team is not going to convince engineering leader to go and buy Avoma. And so typically we have to have your identify who are your ICP. And if the ICP signs up, prioritize those leads. But if your ICP is not signed up, and then let them do the product-led experience, let them experience on their own, and that's totally fine too.
Aditya, I want to go back to something you said earlier about holding the product team accountable to driving 15% of the revenue. What does the product team do different in your setting? Whether that's something in the product, different kind of features, et cetera, or supporting the organization in a different way. Like, talk us through that a little bit. What behavior change does that drive? Holding the team accountable for that metric.
Yeah, and it goes back to my earlier point that I mentioned. When you think about this product-led experiences, I still divide it into two phases. The conversion phase is the post phase, but also the acquisition phase. And so when we are doing the product decision on roadmap, we are identifying features which will drive the acquisition, which is all the features that could do the virality and all of that. So that's when and here's the thing, you might not have any virality in your product, but you have completely self-service onboarding experience and people are able to explain. You might have an amazing content strategy. So your people are acquiring, or the way you are acquiring customers is purely through marketing-led or sales-led motion. And there's no virality in your product. But you build amazing self-service experience and onboarding experience that people are able to buy, experience the value, and paying you. So you don't need salespeople, you don't need that heavy go-to-market team there. That is a product-led experience, but only on the conversion side, and you don't have any virality there. That's totally fine. But you can also think, are there features that you can prioritize that will also drive virality? Loom is an example. Calendly is an example. So one of the things in Avoma's example, we realized that scheduling example was one of the use cases that people use. So every single customer of Avoma also uses scheduler product, Calendly, or something like that. These products are inherently viral. For the historical, early on, when I thought about this market, I thought it's an oversaturated market. We don't need to do it. And so we said, okay, let other people solve the scheduling problem. But our customers started telling us that I'm paying for this another tool just for that scheduling use case. Why don't you guys do it? The more I thought about it, and I thought, hey, now the value for this to optimize is to actually, from a virality point of view, anytime our customers use our scheduler product, they are sharing with our customers and their customers are marketing us. Now our product team, we have a team which is focused on getting that revenue up, and now they're driving that growth and all of that. So they are now responsible for acquisition as well, not just the conversion. Historically, when people prioritize, onboarding is an area where people spend a lot of the product resources trying to simplify the onboarding, make the onboarding default configuration a lot easier and all of that.
Yeah. So we've covered the pre-sales, the product part of it, there's a great question here from Jatin, who's in a customer success role with Video SDK. And his question is around the post-sales growth stage. How do you see the PLG flywheel or the framework sort of operate in that setting? And is there something that you're doing today from that perspective that you can share with the team?
And I think this is a great question, that when you think about these different motions, you don't have to also say that these motions are same for all the stages. You can start few motions in early stages only with the limited uh, go-to-market motions when the stage is early on trying to find the product market fit. But in terms of the growth mode and you're in that growth stage, in fact, actually, the product-led growth model probably works better. And I'll give you a reason why. Um, it's not necessarily that product-led sales makes sense only in the product market fit stage, early stage, when you have less resources and all of that, and you're still trying to figure out, do people care about it? That time you want to have somebody talking to your customers and understanding the qualitative input as well, that why did they buy, why did they not buy? Those inputs are important to go and build the product and make sure you solve the customer's needs. But as the growth stage happened, one of the problem, I recently talked to a product leader. This gentleman, the company is a unicorn company. Their sales team is able to sell the product at a rapid pace. But what they had done historically over the period, they have a lot of implementation managers to solve the problem for onboarding and all of that stuff. Now, interesting problem this company is having is the onboarding is a bottleneck now. They're not able to onboard customers fast enough to what the way the sales team is selling it. Very unique problem. Now, instead of trying to throw people at the problem and fix the problem just for that one time, if you take that, understand what workflow the implementation team is doing. Have your product team build those workflows in the product itself. So you would have an efficient and operation go-to-market motion. So rather than thinking the product-led experience only for the startups, only for these little use cases, you can actually implement that in a growth mode. That's how you will implement and make your go-to-market motion even more efficient. And here's another thing, the adoption, when you simplify your product, when you make it easier to use, even the enterprise customers will have more adoption of the product. The retention will be better, your NPS score will be better. So there is still value in investing the product load experiences and trying to simplify the onboarding experience, trying to define the customer journey and give those aha moments, irrespective if it was purely sales-led motion or not. So that's how I still think even at the growth-led or growth stage, this motion is absolutely important, that you continue to invest and figure out even the whole virality element I talked about. In product PMF stage, you probably are not thinking about all the possible use cases. You're trying to focus on the core use case that you're solving. But when you're at the growth stage, now you're figuring out what are the new channels that we can do. Our existing customers, how they can help us to grow even bigger rather than constantly acquiring new customers. Can they help grow, increase collaboration, increase virality, share with other people? So product team needs to think about those workflows even at the growth stage as well.
Yeah, I think this is very relevant question that Jatin just asked. And look, our experience from talking to a lot of companies, there's almost an overemphasis on PLG at the moment. There's a lot of hype around that word right now.
Absolutely.
We understand that, but I think the principles of being a data-driven organization and not just product usage data, but looking at the full sort of spectrum of data that you have available about your customers, and then driving your processes off of that. That's the core principle that actually applies to every SaaS company. And Jatin, if you're interested in learning more about this, we have a couple more webinars coming up. One with Ashley Hyman at Drata. She's their customer success lead. Another one with Madeline Dupree at Aircall, also their customer success lead, on February 2nd and Jan 31st, 10 a.m. Pacific. So go to our website, immersa.ai events, sign up. But the conversation is all about post-sales and how PLG principles apply in growth mode. I think those are really important conversations, particularly this year when a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to focus on NRR and retention and growth of existing clients, since new logo acquisitions becoming more expensive as a process. Okay, Aditya, I want to come back to a couple other questions. I mean, I'm looking at the time. We We'll go for another 3 to 5 minutes and then make sure
Sure.
people have enough time to move to their next conversations. If there's any final questions from folks that are on the call, please jump in, drop them now. Maybe I'll shift to a little bit of your founder hat again. What do you do different as a founder to maintain the energy that's needed to keep going? Because I mean, this is a long journey. It takes a lot of emotional and physical toil to pull together. How do you deal with that as a founder?
Great question. I don't know if I've figured it out all,
Okay.
but I think the way I always think about it, you have to have a very strong why. Why you exist. You have all these competitors. If you don't have a strong point of view, you're just becoming a me too product. And the life will get difficult when you don't have a strong point of view. When you have a point of view, you have a reasons, you can champion the team, you can align your team to that point of view. And that's really, really important to me, like what you stand for, why those things are important. And it could be not just the gap in the product or the industry, it could be also the value, what values you stand for. This whole thing, as I mentioned, when we started raising capital, almost every single investor didn't like that when I used to say that we're going to do both product led and sales led
Yeah.
at the same time. They used to constantly, we had a lot of rejections. Aditya, pick one. I'm like, no, I'm not going to listen to you. You're not our buyer. Our buyer wants both the things, and I'm going to do that. Now, for 5 years later, every investor is talking about this. Oh, this is the future, and this is what you
Yeah.
need to do. Nobody was talking about this. So we took a point of view at that time. We didn't agree with them, and I believe that that's how the buyers are going to be eventually. So those are the things matters to me. When you have a strong point of view, doesn't matter how many rejections you get, how many things don't go right in your way, you can still bounce back. And the other thing, to be honest, keep it simple and humble. You always have to have my kids, my family, they keep me humble. So anytime that things are not going in the right way, I always make sure that I have the right inspiration, what's important in life. Like these setbacks are fine, we'll
Yeah.
always get back. There's a lot of more other important things in life as well. So keeping
Awesome.
that balance, keeping that sanity definitely helps me.
Aditya, this has been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you for making the time. Now, for the audience that want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
My email address, aditya@avoma.com. Do mention this RevGenius in your subject line so that I can filter out the email and I'll make sure I respond.
Perfect.
The other alternate, I share a lot of these thoughts on LinkedIn. So just search my name on LinkedIn and you should be able to connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Great. Thank you, Aditya. And for those of you that joined us today and participated in the conversation, thank you so much for being here and for engaging in the dialogue. That is how we move our thinking forward as an industry, is by talking to each other. And both Aditya and I are available at any point. If you'd like to talk to either of us, you can find me similarly at aseem@amersa.co. We could not get the .com domain for $2,000. And of course on our website. And finally, just a quick shout out to RevGenius for hosting us today. They will send out a link to the webinar afterwards. So if you'd like to share that with your colleagues who weren't able to join us today, please do. And reach out to either of us at any point. We'd love to continue the conversation with you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.